Okay, its real rise as the premier Shiite center of learning happened in the 20th century. In 1920, Ayatollah Abdul Karim al-Ha'iri, who was one of the major Ayatollahs and scholars in Najaf, and was Iranian, part Iranian by family background, decided that he wished to re-establish the seminaries in Qom. And in 1920, he personally moved him and his entourage. And that's not an insignificant number of people. An Ayatollah like that has a lot of hangers-on. And when he takes them to another city and sets up base there, it's a significant event. And he moved in 1920 from Najaf to Qom, and lo and behold, his students became great scholars in themselves, and they were based in Qom, and then other scholars were attracted to Qom, and Qom developed as the center which it is today throughout the 20th century, until during the period of Saddam Hussein, well, I suppose before that, during the Ba'ath period more generally in Iraq, Najaf its influence began to wane as Shiites became systematically excluded from power in Iraq. And the seminary system in southern Iraq suffered under the discrimination against the Shia during that period. And Najaf began to wane as a center. And this was a great opportunity for Qom, which developed a real identity of its own during the 1950s, even more so during the 60s and 70s, such that it really overtook Najaf. And if we're talking about today, I mean, the seminary system in Qom is probably 3 or 4 times larger than the seminary system in Najaf. That doesn't stop the people in Najaf thinking that Qom is actually a rubbish place to study. If you want to do proper Shiite studies, you've got to be in Najaf. And it doesn't stop, the people in Qom lording over the people from Najaf to say, your system is just a shadow of its former glory. We are the new kids on the block, new kids in terms of the length of Shiite history, and we're the ones that really control we are the powerhouse of Iranian intellectual and Shiite intellectual development. So there's enormous rivalry between Qom and Najaf in the tradition which of all university cities. They always have to have a rival of some description, and Najaf and Qom are no exception. So Abdul Karim Ha'iri from 1920 onwards develops Qom, invests enormously in Qom, and there is a series of great scholars after him, some of whom we'll meet on our tour, or at least we'll meet the record of their influence on the city of Qom as we move across. As you move down from Tehran to Qom on this highway called the Persian Gulf Highway, which runs from Tehran all the way down to the Persian Gulf, you travel through desert, quite remarkable desert scenes and very interesting geographical features of which I know absolutely nothing, but always strike me as particularly beautiful as I move from Tehran to Qom. Tehran is around about 1,700 meters above sea level. Qom is around about 1,000, just under 1,000 meters above sea level. So you're going down about 1,000 meters, so around about 3,000 feet from Tehran down to Qom, and the climate is completely different. Qom is in the middle of a desert. Its water is salty and brackish. Everyone jokes about the quality of tea in Qom being very poor because they make it with salty water. And as you approach Qom, you go past the Hawza Sultan on the left-hand side of the highway, which is this huge salt lake, which is just a huge expanse of land about that deep in crystal salt, which you can walk through and covers your feet. It's an amazing geological feature. But when you reach Qom, the place there where you want to move to first of all is the central area, right in the middle of Qom, known as the Haram. which thank goodness for Google Maps is all I can say. I was able to construct most of this stuff. In the middle where it says Hazrat-e Ma'soumeh, Holy Shrine, that is known as the Haram. And that forms the central area of Qom. And the tour that I'm going to be taking you on will take us from the Haram, and I'll talk a little bit about the Haram, down this street to one of the major libraries called the Library of Ayatollah Marashi, a very famous library. Then we'll come down here, down Mu'alem Street to the house of Imam Khomeini. We'll go down to these crossroads here and look at one of the Imamzadehs, a small shrine dedicated to a descendant of one of the 12 Imams. Then we'll come along Sumaya and Hafez, down here to this, the Jamiat al-Zahra. Jamiat al-Zahra is a huge women's seminary in Qom. I'll take you to Mufid University just south. This is a very interesting institution which is a fusion of university system and seminary system, and be able to talk a bit about that. We'll return up here and go along Boulevard Amin. We'll stop just here where the red line stops and show you one of the seminaries there, and we'll have a look at the Musalla-e-Quds. I thought that was appropriate since we're in Jerusalem, that we should see the Musalla-e-Quds. We'll visit one Ayatollah's offices here, and another Ayatollah's offices there, and I'll tell you a little bit about the Ayatollahs. A library here, and then we'll return to the Maidan, the central Maidan of the Haram, that meaning the square of the Haram, and I'll talk a little about the Hausa offices and the attempts to reform. And if we have time, I'll take you out of the city, south to the Jamkaran Mosque, to give you a flavour of just here, a flavour of some of the more fringe religious activities that are going on in Qom. So that's the tour. Let's begin with the shrine of the Fatimeh Ma'soumeh. This is a shrine. It's been known as the burial place of Fatima. Not Fatima, who was the daughter of the Prophet Muhammad, but Fatima, who was the daughter of the 7th Imam, who died in Qom on her way to visit her brother Ali Aridda, the 8th Imam up in Mashhad, who was unwell, and she fell ill in Qom and passed away there on the way up to Mashhad. And a shrine developed around her. And the shrine, the tomb itself, dates from around about the 13th century. The dome is Safavid, because, as I said, during the Safavid period, that is from the 16th century onwards, much money was ploughed into Qom, and Shah Abbas II, one of the Safavid Shahs, is buried in the shrine itself. And so since the death of Ma'soumeh, so that's early 9th century, 816. So since 816, when she died and was buried there, this has been a center of pilgrimage. The minarets are Qajar. That means that they're 19th century minarets. The dome is Safavid, and the tomb inside is 13th century. So you can see how it's grown over the centuries. And it received much money in the early 19th century. And Fath Ali Shah, the first Shah of the Qajars, who reigned from 1794 up until 1835, decided this is where he wanted to be buried. And his tomb is also inside the Haram area. So that's the area of the Haram in the center there. Another picture of the Haram courtyard there, as you look through one of the gates leading into the Haram area. Non-Muslims are supposed not to be permitted to enter the Sahn, the courtyard of the Haram, but to be honest, it depends what day of the week you go and who happens to be the guard on the door, because sometimes I've been turned away and sometimes I've been let in. And even when I've worn my scruffiest clothes I've still been turned and tried to blend in with the Iranian populace. I've still been turned away. So there's no rhyme or reason to it, to be honest. This is an aerial view of the haram, and it's a fantastic complex, really. Just to run through, the Burujadi library we'll be returning to at the end. But if we run through the haram itself, the haram dome, which is marked there. The sahan right in front of it with a fountain in the center. This area, the new Mosalla to the left, they've been expanding this used to be a courtyard and it's now a covered area in Qom. I think it's the most hideous thing ever, but they've built this huge Mosalla next to the prayer hall, next to the haram, and they've covered it over now. Covering over a courtyard. It's a bit disappointing in my view, but never mind. They don't really listen to my opinions, you'll be surprised to hear. Marashi Street is the one which we're going to be going down in a minute. The Haram Treasury and Library. The Haram itself has a library, a very good library of manuscripts. It's a difficult library to access, particularly as a non-Muslim, since it's inside the shrine. So since non-Muslims are not allowed inside the shrine, it's a bit difficult to get access to the library. But theoretically, non-Muslims are allowed to use the library. But unless you parachute in, there's no means of getting there unless you manage to get past the guards. So you have to have a whole number of special permissions before you can get to the library, but it's a particularly rich collection of manuscripts, around about 12,000. It's a beautiful manuscript. The Masjid-e-Azam, just north of there, is the big blue dome, which you see on pictures of Qom. I don't know if that was on the... Before you go back. Yes, the big blue dome, blue floral pattern dome. That was built in the 1950s, and we'll see about that under the auspices of Ayatollah Burujadi, whose library is just next to it as well. So if we leave the harams and we come out into the Maidan, the square, that's the view you get from the Maidan, and just across from the Maidan there, you have the Sheikhan graveyard, and I'll just introduce you to that because this is a good place to start. This is where two of the great founding intellectuals of hadith scholarship, of the transmission of the tales of the Prophet Muhammad and his imam and his successors, the imams, are buried. We have Ali ibn Babuya. Those of you who know anything about Shiism, this isn't Sheikh Sadok, this is his father, but he's still an important hadith commentator. So Ali ibn Babuya is buried there in the center, and Ibn Qulaywa, who is also buried there, and they have their, and that's in the Sheikhan, the two sheikhs graveyard. The Sahne Haram, which I mark there to give you an idea of the distance that we will travel across the Maidan to that. This is what it looks like as you approach it. I apologize for the quality of some of the pictures on this. First of all, I'm not a great photographer. Secondly, I'm not particularly technologically sufficient. And when you put these two together and put a PowerPoint, the results cannot always be totally satisfactory. But I hope you get the idea. As you approach the Sheikhan graveyard, you have graves and memorials on the outside of people. It's an expensive place to die, actually, Qom, and an expensive place to be buried. It's a highly prized area in terms of your fate in the next life if you manage to be buried in Qom. So it's not cheap. Large numbers of people who were martyred in the Iraq War are buried in Qom. Because of the religious significance of their death. This is the only picture I could get of the inside, which I downloaded off the internet. I don't have a picture that I took myself of the inside of the Sheikhan Maqbara, the grave site, you might say. And unfortunately, you've got Ayatollah Khamenei in the foreground because it was taken during his visit to the Sheikhan. But I thought it was a good view of the tomb behind, and inside that tomb there are two grave sarcophagi to the two sheikhs. Coming out back into the Maidan where we are now, on the right-hand side, you see the gold dome. On the right-hand side, on the street level, you'll see a small blue archway. That is the entrance to the Fayziya. The Fayziya is the oldest and probably most important madrasa in Qom. when you go in through that door, you go into a courtyard with a fountain in the center, surrounded by sumptuous portals leading into study rooms behind. Here's a picture of the